Oh, hey guys. So, this video is for entertainment and education purposes only. Any and everything I say could be wrong. Do your own research and come to your own conclusions. So, in this video, I was inspired to do this just as I'm, flipping through BitChute and etc. and, watching a few videos. And I mentioned this in a comment, and so I just want to talk about this. And okay, so I want to make a couple disclaimers. So first of all, this is going to be about the Bible, okay? The Bible, okay? And also, what I'm going to talk about is a documentary that I saw on YouTube back in 2015, which has since been scrubbed from the internet, okay? But basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over the best I can what this documentary was saying in regards to the Bible. And so this isn't to promote the Bible or promote Christianity. This is just me attempting to just lay out basically what this documentary said and let the viewer decide, whatever. I don't care what you decide. But so when I watched this video about the Bible, of how the Bible was written, it tripped me out. It really tripped me out because it seems to provide a lot of very compelling evidence that, in a general sense, the Bible is a pretty solid book overall. All books are going to have flaws, but there are these safe-proof tactics that were used when putting the Bible together. They took a lot of precautions to put the Bible together in a way to where it would be very difficult for people to refute the Bible, for people to say, "Oh, this is just more bullshit," it's just more bullshit. So what I want to do is just explain the best I can of what this documentary laid out. And that a lot of this stuff is actually you can vet this as to whether or not it's fact or not. What I'm saying is like if I said 2 + 2 = 4, you can vet that and be like, well, I don't know if that's true that 2 + 2 = 4. Let me do some experimentation to verify whether or not I'm going to go along with this idea that 2 + 2 = 4. And then, and then you do it, it's like, okay, here's a bunch of beads. So if 2 + 2 = 4, that would mean if I took these 2 beads and then I added 2 more, that the total number would come to 4. Let's see if that's actually true or if I'm being bullshitted by somebody. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, yeah, I mean, by all evidence, it appears that statement is probably true, that 2 + 2 = 4. That's what I'm saying. This shit is you can vet this shit that they were laying out, these different facts and stuff regarding the Bible, okay? So, without further ado, let's go into it. And because to me, it's interesting. I'm more interested in the truth than I am if the truth is going to, confirm my bias or not. That's what critical thinking is about. Is less about looking for things that are going to confirm my bias and more about just I just want to know the truth. And so if the truth goes against my bias, then I'm just going to have to humble myself and swallow my pride and just accept it, if that is in fact the case, right? And so I like to try as much as possible, and I like to, that's who I want to become, is someone who is just more about accepting the truth for what it is than looking for how what is going to confirm my bias of what I think the truth is. So, okay, so here's some shit. This was about an hour and a half long documentary, and it was fascinating because I'm like looking for, okay, you know, I'm not like looking to confirm my bias either way on the Bible. I'm just watching this documentary out of curiosity to put it to the acid test to see, is this really going to be some compelling shit? Is this really going to be like compelling evidence that the Bible, in a general sense, is actually a really solid book that you can't, that you know, that holds its own, you know what I mean, that holds its own water, that isn't full of holes and shit, right? Okay, so this is what this documentary was explaining, and this is why it was tripping me out, dude. And I started looking at the Bible differently. Okay, so they were explaining, you know, they went into explaining how the Bible came to be, okay? And then they had like a couple Hebrew guys, like they had Hebrew guys that could actually read ancient Hebrew. They could read it and like read it word for word and tell you what that means and transcribe it into English, okay? So they could take like a book of ancient Hebrew and open it up and just start reading any and everything, and then tell you like, well, this is what this sentence means, okay? And so, and then these Hebrew guys explained that Hebrew is the oldest language that can be transcribed word for word in modern times. So any language that's as old as Hebrew or older than Hebrew cannot be transcribed word for word. Like they only know like a fraction of what you know, only a fraction of all these other old languages can be interpreted into like the English language. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Okay, so I'll explain this a little bit. Okay, so like all other languages that are as old or older than Hebrew, than the Hebrew language, you can only decipher like half of it because the language is lost. Whereas Hebrew is the only language that's as old or older than all these others, where the language has not been lost. It has been preserved unto this very day. So it is the oldest language that is still where you can interpret it word for word. It is, and this is you can vet this. You can go and research for yourself, and then you would have to admit, yes, that's true. Hebrew is the oldest language that is still to this day fully interpreted. Every single word in the Hebrew language can be interpreted to English, Chinese. You know, it's the only language that's that old where you can interpret it word for word. All other languages, as old as Hebrew or older, you can't. You can't do that. And so this documentary was explaining that, and I was like, whoa. And this Hebrew dude, he like took this fucking 2,000-year-old book with all this Hebrew shit, and he was able to read it word for word and then explain to you, this is what this means, okay? So Hebrew is the oldest language that can be interpreted word for word. All other languages that are old, that are as old or older, cannot be interpreted word for word. Only Hebrew. So here's the first thing that makes the Hebrew language unique from all other ancient fucking texts. Hebrew stands apart in that respect. And this is fact. You can research this if you want to. And then you would have to humble yourself and come to the humbling conclusion that yes, this is true. Hebrew is the oldest decipherable language in the fucking world, okay? So there's point one. That's the first point. Now we're talking about how the Bible came to be. So here now let's continue on. Okay? So now this documentary did a much better presentation than I'm going to do. Because I'm going to say fuck you and I'm just going to speak, you know, how I talk and in my uneducated way, and I don't give a fuck, right? I'm just trying to tell you, that's all, okay? I'm just the messenger. Don't kill the messenger. Okay, so point one. Hebrew is, in fact, the oldest decipherable language, okay? So you can't argue that. Sorry. That's just the way it is, okay? So now, let's go into some more stuff, okay? And this is also, you know, in a general way, this is also something else that is you can vet this. You can research and look and come to this general overall conclusion. And that is that Hebrew, like the Hebrew people, they made it like a ritualistic daily practice to scribe. And that means to write shit down. And this is something about the Hebrew culture that sets the Hebrews apart from like pretty much all other cultures. The Hebrews, to a fault, were obsessed with scribing. And so that means they're writing every fucking thing down. Everything. Right down to, you know, oh, I dropped a cigarette butt. Okay, I dropped a cigarette butt, fell out of my ashtray. You know, these motherfuckers, I'm telling you, that this is the way of the Hebrew. Is they fucking wrote down everything. And everybody, all Hebrews did. They wrote down every fucking thing. And so, okay, for example, say I'm a Hebrew, right? And I'm living in a community of Hebrews, okay? And say there's like, I live in this little Hebrew town of 2,000 population Hebrews, right? And if there was some embarrassing fact about the Hebrew town that I lived in, I'm writing that shit down. I'm writing it down. So even if it was an embarrassing fact about my own people, I didn't care. Because first and foremost, everything must be scribed, no matter what. That's the rule. This is the rule. And in a general way, like, Hebrews were all autonomous in that sense. Every individual Hebrew, in a general sense, was writing down everything no matter what it was. So if it's like some Hebrew was like fucking obsessed with jacking off, they're writing it down. They're like, fuck, I can't stop masturbating, dude. Like, I don't know. I'm going crazy over here. Like, I'm like totally like sexually obsessed right now. And so they wrote everything down, dude. No matter how embarrassing it was to the Hebrew culture and the Hebrew people, they wrote it down because they all were autonomous. Every one of them was autonomous. So I might be writing something down but then all in the Hebrew town that I live in, like the majority of the 1,999 other people, they were all autonomously writing their own shit down. But this spanned continents. This was like I'm in this little town of 2,000 Hebrews, but like 1,000 miles away, there would be another town of Hebrews, and they were all doing the same thing. So all these fucking Hebrews are obsessed with scribing and writing shit down. And this spanned like continents. Okay? So let me give you an example, okay? Let's say I'm a Hebrew. And again, this is way back in the day, so there weren't airplanes and cars to where I could drive 1,000 miles and go visit some Hebrews on the other side of the continent. No, I never even met those motherfuckers. You understand? Okay? And so let's say I'm in this little town, this little Hebrew town of 2,000 people. And in a general sense, me and all my Hebrew compadres, we're all obsessively scribing. Like, it is very important to keep a daily account of any and everything. And so everybody's doing it, you know, everybody's doing it. Kind of like how today everybody has a job in this fake money system. Even though the money system is fake and rigged, everybody has a job anyways and just keeps working even though it's a fake and rigged money system. Same thing. All these Hebrews, they're just scribing no matter what. It doesn't matter. They're just writing it down. It doesn't even matter, right? And they're all doing it. Just like everybody's working these stupid jobs for this stupid fake and rigged money system. They're working anyways. This is how obsessively like Hebrews scribed. They're scribes. Okay, so let's say I'm in this little town, right? And there's 2,000 Hebrews, give or take. And this big, massive fucking thing comes out of the sky. And let's say it's like a 2,000 mile wide object that just descends from the clouds. And it's just like, and then it just is like going and it just goes. And it's like, and everybody's like, what the fuck is that, right? Well, so then all them scribes are all writing it down. I was like taking a shit, and I was jacking off while I was taking a shit, and then this big giant fucking thing that was like the size of the fucking sky, it looked like some like metal object that was, it was a vehicle, and it had fire shooting out of the side. So all these scribes, they're all writing this down, okay? And then this UFO or whatever you want to call it, it just keeps going. And it passes the little town I'm in. But it keeps going. And then it, you know, a couple hundred miles away, there's another town full of a bunch of Hebrews. And all those Hebrews see the same thing. And they're like, what the fuck? And so then they're all writing it down. Like, I see I was outside watering my plants and this fucking thing and so they're all writing it down. And then let's say that object, the UFO or whatever, it just keeps going. Yeah, you know, and 1,000 miles later, it crosses another area where there's a whole bunch of Hebrews that are all obsessed with scribing daily events, and they all see it and they're like, oh my God, and they're all writing it. You see, you have this account of all of these fucking Hebrews that span entire continents, and they're all writing down the same thing. I saw this massive fucking UFO and fire was shooting out, right? And so then you've got all these scribes that are all piling up in all these Hebrew communities that span continents. Are you getting where I'm going with this? And that this is how the Bible was written, dude. It was not written by Tucker Carlson and the mainstream media conglomerate. This was written by just regular, everyday Hebrews who, by by their cultural practice and tradition, were obsessively journaling the day's events that spanned continents. And so, yeah, this wasn't like mainstream media putting out these stories. This was all these masses and masses of people who were all religiously documenting with pen and paper, writing down everything that they saw and experienced. And the way the Bible was put together was all these scribes, they gathered up all the different scribes all over the place. And then they went through every scribe, okay? And whenever there was a large aggregate where all these scribes were writing the similar or same thing, and there was this massive aggregate, like the story of the UFO. And all these scribes that spanned continents were all writing how they saw this massive, like 2,000 mile wide object that was floating in the sky and fire was spewing out of it. So all these scribes all over this continent, they were all writing about this crazy UFO. Well, what they did is that was an aggregate where everybody's writing the same thing. So they took those aggregates and collected them together, and then just composed them into one basic book, using all of the aggregates of all of these different accounts that were saying the same fucking thing. Do you understand? So like any single book in the Bible was not just written by Tucker Carlson. It's like, I'm the great Tucker Carlson. I'm the face of Fox News, and I'm writing this down because this is what happened. No, it was an aggregate of the people. So he and the language, Hebrew is the only language that is decipherable to this day. Like, it's the oldest language in the world that can be interpreted word for word. All other languages that are as old or older than Hebrew, you cannot interpret them word for word. Only Hebrew. And so they took all these scribes that all these fucking Hebrews all over the place were doing. They gathered them all together, and then they matched them up. They separated them into aggregates. So whenever like masses of Hebrews spanning continents were all writing the similar or same thing, they gathered those all up together into a book. Okay? And then of course they had to take all of these accounts and then just summarize them in a synopsis of what everybody was writing. And then that was all these different books in the Bible are all an account of the people, not Tucker Carlson, not the king of Egypt, you know what I'm saying? Not Richie from Boston. No, this is like an account of masses of people. It's an aggregate of an account that all these different people are saying the same thing, that they saw some guy walking in the clouds. And so, see, and this is like a safe, this is like a way to where if everybody's saying, like if you have the entire African continent, okay, back then when there weren't cars and airplanes and shit, and traveling was like you either walked or you rode a donkey or some shit, right? And you got this entire continent, and all throughout these spanning thousands of miles of this continent, and all the people of its time were all writing down something similar or the same, where they saw some man walking in the clouds and shooting fucking fireballs out his ass or whatever. But they're all, this entire continent, they're all writing the same thing, even though they've never even met each other. See, that's like, it's harder to refute something like that when it's just everyday people spanning an entire continent the size of Africa. And you gather together all the different writings of that continent during that time. And they're all writing about seeing some man walking in the clouds and throwing lightning bolts down and shit. You know, it makes it a lot harder to refute, because it's not just some manipulated thing that the ruler of Egypt, you know. And this is how the Bible, and then one way to confirm that is that Hebrew is still, like, all that shit that was written 2,000 years ago, you can still decipher it word for word. Whereas all these other languages during that time, you cannot. All the other languages during that time and before are not decipherable. You might be able to decipher like 1/3 of that language, but Hebrew is the only language that's that old that can be deciphered word for word. And if you've got all, and you know, you can, like, scientists and shit like this can take a stack of scribes that spanned a continent, and they can take those documents down and they can do tests on these scribes to authenticate them. So they can see, like, well, yeah, we ran all these scientific tests and proved that, yes, this transcription is from 2,000 years ago, and it is Hebrew. And yes, people that know how to read and write Hebrew can decipher all of this scribe word for word. And here's a stack of like 200,000 scribes that all say the same or similar thing, and they can all be authenticated that, yes, these were written 2,000 years ago. So they can prove that this is how the Bible was written. And so then it makes it a lot. How are you going to explain that all these people that spanned an entire continent the size of Africa were all writing the same thing? That there was this giant, massive UFO that was shooting lightning bolts, and there was like a group of people, dressed in silver spandex, and they were all dancing with a disco ball, or whatever the fuck the outlandish story was. How would you explain that an entire continent the size of Africa, like, you have all these people writing the same fucking thing, that yes, that is in fact what they saw, and you can authenticate like thousands of these scribes that span an entire continent, and they're all writing the same thing. What are they doing? Are they calling each other on the cell phone and saying, okay, we're all going to make up this lie of how we saw a UFO, and we need everybody in the entire continent of Africa to all write the similar or same thing. That way it looks like that this has really happened. What are they doing? Are they contacting each other on their Egyptian fucking, cell phones and shit, are they driving around? Okay, you guys, I'm Tucker Carlson, and I want you to all write the same lie. Okay, and you need to do this because it's important. And now I'm going to get in my car and drive, hundreds of miles to the next area and tell them all this. See, you can't explain how all these fucking people were all saying the same thing. And this is how the books of the Bible were written. And so it makes it a lot harder to refute the Bible in a general sense. Like the Bible, the book as a whole, yes, you could go in and say, well, this line says that, blah, 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 and that's total bullshit. Yeah, but I'm talking about the book as a whole. The book as a whole in its entirety, in a general sense, the book, the Bible, is the most solid Bible, or the most solid book in history, because it was written by masses and hordes of people, not Tucker Carlson. It wasn't written by Tucker Carlson or some individual. It was written by the masses of the people, not the rulers of the land, the people. And it's an aggregate of all those different writings that the people wrote. And they gathered it all together, and then they went through and they compartmentalized all these different writings, and they saw that these people are all writing about this UFO thing, but they're all writing the same thing, but all these people, they span an entire continent the size of Africa. So how is it possible that all these people would all be making up the same story? Therefore, this kind of corroborates this outlandish story. When you've got these masses of people spanning an entire continent the size of Africa, all writing generally the same thing. And this is how all the different books of the Bible were put together. And again, you could go through with a magnifying glass. If all you're doing is looking for the flaws and the faults, and with a fine-tuned comb and magnifying glass, of course you're going to find flaws in it. But overall, the book, it's the most solid book because it was written by the people, not the rulers of the land. It was written by the people. And this is all can be confirmed because everybody knows it's a historical fact in a general sense that is very difficult to refute, that Hebrews were all obsessively scribing to a fault. Like they were like idiot savants. They were like full retard scribers. Like it was like full retard scribe mode, and everybody's just writing all the time. But the reason that they adopted this culture is because the rulers of the land were always manipulating facts and all this stuff, and they were outlawing, education. They were making it's against the law to read and write. And this is why the Hebrews would obsessively write and scribe, because that was the rebellion of its time. The only way to rebel against this ruling class system was to do that. Everybody write. Everybody start writing everything. No matter who you are, no matter where you are, everybody write obsessively. Full retard. Just write everything always, all the time. Document everything. And the Hebrews were smart enough to all come together and agree, okay, we'll all do this. We'll write everything down we'll just write everything down. That is a massive component of our life, is to write everything down, because the ruling classes were fucking ass raping them 24 hours a day and manipulating. The ruling class of its time were always rewriting history so that it reflected favorably on the ruling class. That's why the people wrote everything down. Like, oh no, fuck these motherfuckers. We got to do something to fight back. And that's how they fought back, is they documented everything. And it worked, because over a long period of time, you gather up all the scribes of all the people and you start looking at them, and you can compartmentalize them into aggregates where all these people were all writing the same thing during this time. Therefore, you can't say that they were all lying. How would they all be, what are the logistics in that? If they live like thousands of miles apart from each other, how is it that they were all writing the same thing? And so, and when I saw this documentary on the Bible, I was impressed, because I really was. I was trying to set aside my bias, and I was trying to set aside, I just want to hear this out. Let's hear this out. Put it to the fucking acid test. If it's bullshit, it's bullshit. I don't know. And when I got done watching that documentary, it was like, bro, like this shit that they're saying is all you can vet this. You can find out whether or not this is true. And like, it's pretty, I never did do a massive deep dive because, that would take a long, but like when you just look at empirical evidence, like, yeah, somebody that knows how to read and write Hebrew can take a fucking book that was written in Hebrew 1,000 years ago and set it down and open it up and read it word for word and tell you, yes, so Hebrew is the oldest, arguably, and scientists just confirm it, and a lot of these guys in the documentary, they're just scientists. They go by the science. They don't have a religious thing. Just like that guy who proved that that Auschwitz wasn't exterminating, thousands of people. He wasn't that guy was just a scientist. He accidentally discovered the Holocaust. It was an accident. He didn't go there with a agenda. He didn't care either way. He's just a fucking scientist, dude. He has no reason to lie. And he accidentally discovered the Holocaust. And then he fucking came forward and is like, dude, I found all this information. And then they blacklisted him and ruined his whole life because all he was doing was what a scientist does. And it's the same concept. All these people, they're just writing shit down. They don't know that if after 100 years or something of all this scribing, that if you gathered it all together, you could see that all these different writings from all over the place are all corroborating each other's stories, even though these people have never even met. There's no way they could be conspiring to create a lie. There's no fucking way. Like, this is impossible. So anyways, of course I did a terrible job of explaining all this, but yeah, so but for anybody that kind of speaks my language and that can hear what I'm saying, like, to him who has an ear, let him hear. If you're able to get past, all my flaws and just listen to what I'm saying, like, this is what the documentary said. And I can't, dude, that documentary has been scrubbed from the internet. And I wonder why, but like I'm telling you, like, I'm just looking at it objectively. And when I saw that documentary, I was like, no matter how much you might want to deny it, it's hard to deny. Just like the concept of 2 + 2 = 4. No matter how much you want to deny it, when you put it to the acid test and you're like, okay, I'm skeptical of this idea that 2 + 2 = 4. So you're saying if I took these two beads, see these, that's 2, and then I took 2 more beads and I added them together, that would come to 4. All right, maybe you're full of shit, maybe you're not. Let's put it to the acid test. 1, 2, that's 2. Oh, now I'm doing some sleight of hand trickery, right? There's 2, okay. Then we got 3. There's 3. Okay, and 1 more. 2 + 2 = 4. Okay, okay, all right. I guess I'll go along with that. Like, there are some things where no matter how you might want to refute it, if you put it to the acid test, it's hard to argue. It's like, all right, I guess 2 + 2 does = 4, but fuck you anyways, or whatever.